Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's talk. Tonight, we have a talk on the highlights of a recently published study funded by KFAS and conducted by Arabnet on Kuwait's corporate readiness for the fourth industrial revolution. The presentation today will take approximately 30 minutes, followed by a Q&A session. So please, if you have any questions, please place them on the right, type them in on the right-hand side of your screen so that we can capture them and make sure we answer them at the end of the presentation. The speaker tonight is Omar Christidis. He is the founder and CEO of Arabnet and a partner and board member at the Lebanon Seed Fund. Mr. Omar, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Aisha, and I hope everyone can hear me. It's a real pleasure to be with you here today to be sharing the findings of our research in collaboration with KFAS. Aisha, if we could just get the presentation on the screen as well. Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you to our audience for joining us. As Aisha mentioned, actually, this is a part of a four report series that we did with KFAS. This report in particular that we'll be discussing the findings of is a cross-sectoral research looking at corporate readiness for the fourth industrial revolution. But I wanted to say that we've also developed three additional pieces of research that are more in-depth and specific about specific sectors. And so we have a publication focused on healthcare, we have another publication focused on food and hospitality, and a third focused on the ICT sector. All of those dive into more specific details. So if you're in one of those sectors, we encourage you as well to explore those publications. And without further ado, I'm going to dive right into the presentation. And so as I mentioned, the objectives of this report is to investigate how large corporations and SMEs across Kuwait are transforming to thrive in the digital age, the barriers and drivers that are facing their digital transformation strategies, as well as best practices around how they're implementing and driving forward their digitization efforts. And it's based on a series of 12 interviews. So the findings are a bit more qualitative and descriptive. We did open-ended interviews with corporate senior executives across a range of industries in some of the largest or most prominent corporates in Kuwait. And you can see some of the companies that we spoke with across the banking sector, players like Kuwait Finance House and Budian, from telecommunication players like Zen and STC, Equate within the oil sector, GIG within healthcare, KIPCO, which is quite diversified, agility and logistics. So a broad range of industries were covered in this report. And before we dive into the specific findings, we wanted to contextualize the research in what's going on globally with digital transformation, especially in light of COVID. And what we can see certainly is that technology investment has been increasing despite the economic slowdown. And COVID-19 has accelerated the adoption of emerging technologies. And if we look at the right, this is a piece of research done by IFS Research, and it's a survey of over 1,000 senior executives across the US and the UK. 52% of them said that they have plans to place more spending on digital transformation initiatives. More than half the companies are planning to spend more. About 18% plan to spend less, and one of the drivers for that could be the economic downturn itself. 16% have no plans to change spending. Around 10% we're planning to implement digital transformation, but the market conditions have forced them to slow down, and only 3% have no plans to spend at all on digital transformation. So, and when we talk about COVID-19 accelerating the adoption of emerging technologies, Twilio, one of the global integrated communication companies, did a survey of 2,500 of its customers and found that 97% of them said that COVID had accelerated the adoption of emerging technologies. And we can see this, and we experienced it ourselves, in our own lives, the growth of e-commerce, the growth of media, as many of us were homebound, but many of those behaviors continuing as we hopefully are now emerging from the COVID crisis. If we look across the region, MENA governments actually have been playing a significant role in driving digitization. And we've seen a number of major kind of trends. The first is the creation of new institutions. We could talk about institutions like the Saudi Data and Artificial Intelligence Authority, the Ministry of Artificial Intelligence in the United Arab Emirates. They've been rolling out lots of new legislation. There's been legislation across the board, certainly around data, around artificial intelligence, but also around fintech. We've seen central banks be very active around open banking and developing platforms to regulate fintech. We've seen partnerships with big tech. So we've seen, for example, Bahraini government collaboration with AWS, Amazon Cloud, to deliver services through them, and focus on building local human capital. So a lot of training and upskilling initiatives, especially focused on youth across the region. And when we look at companies in particular, a study by Ernst & Young showed that 80% of MENA executives said that transformation was aimed at meeting profitability goals in response to the pandemic. So we see a similar kind of thread that the pandemic continues to be a driving force towards greater digitization. And 73% taking steps to change their digital transformation and speed up automation initiatives. Now, this is the regional context. Certainly, Kuwait is no exception. The Vision 2035 is aiming to shift Kuwait from an oil-based economy to a knowledge-based economy. And we have seen a number of initiatives launched, $900 million dedicated for initiatives that strengthen the digital ecosystem and transform infrastructure. On the SME side, we've seen the establishment of the Kuwait National Fund for SME Development, among other initiatives to drive forth innovation and small business. We've seen the installment of fiber optic networks by the Ministry of Communication, and a growing IT market sized today at $1.8 billion. There's also a lot of sector-specific initiatives that are going on in Kuwait. Building out 5G and LTE, but they're also developing vertical-specific digital offerings, including offerings for e-healthcare, transportation, solutions like fleet management, as well as logistics. Oil and gas has seen a lot of activity, and this is one of the major sectors in the Kuwait economy. The Kuwait Oil Company launched 4 pilot programs for integrated digital oil and gas fields, and the Kuwait Integrated Petroleum and Industries Company expanded through a partnership with Microsoft. And the last that I want to mention is in manufacturing. The Kuwait Steel has partnered with SAP to boost manufacturing growth, efficiency, and productivity. So, of course, this is not comprehensive. We wanted to take a few examples to highlight how digital transformation is really taking place across industries quite quickly in Kuwait. And so now we go to the findings of our research. And as I mentioned, this is based on a survey with 12 organizations, some of the largest corporates. And we started really by asking around the objectives and drivers. What is driving them to establish their digitization strategy? And some of the really common answers that we got are around agile digital competitors. And so we are seeing today the crop of fintechs that are starting to compete with banks. We're seeing globally companies that like Amazon enter healthcare and the pharmacy business. And so we are seeing digital challengers and, as I was mentioning, the threat of global competitors, players like Amazon and others, potentially entering the market, both driving corporates' interest and energy towards digitization. A third component is changing consumer behavior. As I mentioned before, we've all experienced this personally, increasing adoption of things like e-commerce, online media, consumption, communication through digital channels. Customers today are looking for a 24/7 experience on their mobile device, and that really is a driver for companies to digitize to keep up with their consumers. Digitization for expansion is another. Digitization allows companies to be able to rapidly scale across borders, or to access customers that they would have otherwise not had the ability to access. And so that is another driver. And then, of course, keeping up with global technology trends. And there are many trends right now that are transforming business across industry. Within the report, we look in more detail at things like artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, blockchain, and all of these are going to have structural impacts on the way that some of these sectors are organized, and therefore are pushing executives to really up their digitization efforts. When asked about what they want to accomplish in their digital transformation efforts, 58% of executives surveyed mentioned improving customer experience and increasing efficiency. Those are actually two separate answers. We just lumped them here together. So those were the highest two answers: improving customer experience and increasing efficiency. The third was developing innovative products. And then other goals that were mentioned include agility, the ability to respond quickly to changing market dynamics, security, especially with the increasing threat of cyber hackers, differentiation, as the market becomes more and more competitive, the ability to stand out, and market expansion. After understanding what what was driving corporates to their digital transformation efforts, we wanted to start with understanding what are some of the first steps that they took. 58% of companies said that they already had a strategy in place when they started. So when we look at starting date and when did companies embark on their digital transformation efforts, 58% of companies already had a strategy in place. 41% had developed it within the last 3 years, so it was relatively new, and 17% have had it for more than 3 years. And actually, the next chart shows this in a bit more detail. So the two numbers I've shared are the bottom numbers. 41%, we have just started a digital transformation program. 17% have had it for longer than 3 years. 17% are planning to introduce one within the next 12 months. And 25% have no current plan to run a overarching digital strategy. That doesn't mean that they're not digitizing, but it does mean that they don't have an overarching company-wide or company-level digital transformation strategy. But that does tell us that 75% of the companies either have one or plan to introduce one in the coming 12 months. There was a general consensus when we talked to the survey respondents that there isn't necessarily a start date. And this is where, again, we go back to the idea of whether it's an overarching strategy or many initiatives. But there was a general consensus among survey respondents that digital transformation is an ongoing and continuous process without a start or an end. As I was mentioning, we asked what were the first steps taken to implement their digital transformation plans. And these are some of the commonly cited first steps. The first was really understanding business priorities and objectives. What is it that we want to accomplish as a business through our digitization efforts? Second was about getting alignment. First, by getting alignment with the board and approval with the board. And second, within other stakeholders, whether that's partners, whether that's key executives, just making sure that everyone is aligned towards this direction. After that, was the introduction of pilots and proofs of concept. So these are tests that can help deliver the momentum needed to drive further transformation. Assigning a team and a lead, and we're going to get further into who leads the digital transformation as we asked a number of questions about this. And then building milestones and a roadmap for the transformation strategy. The next thing we dived into with the senior executives was around the challenges that they faced in their digital transformation efforts. And the number one challenge that faced digital transformation, according to executives, was human capital issues. And the single highest one, at 83% of respondents, stated cultural issues and resistance to change as their biggest challenge that they face. 58% cited lack of leadership buy-in, which is very close to cultural issues and resistance to change. It's another cultural or buy-in issue. The third was around shortage of talent and skills and capabilities. And the 33% was around lack of collaboration and conflicting priorities inside the company. So really human capital, the soft part of driving the digital transformation strategy, whether that is aligning internally, externally with the board and finding the talent and getting everyone to work together, those were clearly identified as the top challenges facing a digital transformation. This next challenge that was cited by survey respondents was around budgets and vendors. Nearly half cited that cost and budget restraints were an issue, as well as the availability of limited quality vendors around technology. One of the less cited answers was infrastructure and regulation. And perhaps this is, kind of ties into what I was saying earlier around the rapid pace of regulation change that has been happening in the market, and the significant investment into technology infrastructure led only 10% of respondents cited infrastructure and regulation as obstacles. So this may be, contrary to what some might have initially thought. Beyond the challenges, we wanted to understand what are the best practices. What have you learned from your digitization efforts, and how should we implement those? How can we learn about the implementation best practices? And we'll start with human capital, as we identified that as the #1 challenge. And certainly digital transformation, as we've seen, is technology enabled, but people led. And so we started by asking who leads. And what we found out that was interesting is the highest percentage answered the C-suite leads, not the CEO, but individuals within the C-suite. That was about 50%, 46%, or roughly half of the respondents. The other answers were divided roughly evenly between the CEO, and you could collapse the CEO with the C-suite to actually get roughly 60% of all respondents, or almost 2/3, are either the CEO or the C-suite. And then roughly 20% answered head of IT, and 20% through project management team and committee. So it shows us again the importance of having the C-suite drive the digitization process, or the digital transformation process. Another question we asked was around and that were needed, and new hiring that was done in order to meet the transformation objectives. About 25% only said that they had no new roles and no new hiring that needed to happen for their digital transformation efforts. And then the other answers were split roughly evenly, almost 40% each. 38% saying that they had new hires in existing department or reassigned roles, and about 37% set up new departments or roles specifically for digital transformation. So we can see there was an even split between entities that were doing it within their existing structure, or entities that were creating a new and separate structure to drive their digital transformation efforts. Training was considered very important. 2/3 of survey respondents answered that they are training and offering their staff learning and development initiatives. Training is led by both in-house talent and external consultants, and some companies have a larger development plan and talent development plan. Others were delivering training based on changing organizational needs, but this was identified as a key. I'm sorry, I'm just seeing here. Okay, the messages were from earlier. I'm sorry for my internet glitched earlier, but 66%, as I mentioned the importance of investing in training their staff. The second best practice that we wanted to dive into was around tackling internal resistance. And as we've seen, cultural issues is the #1 challenge faced by companies in driving their digital transformation efforts. And so we wanted to understand, how are they resolving these issues? And the first was around engagement and education. So there was a lot of communication efforts that were going into getting the broad-based buy-in, both from leadership and from employees. So the best practices that were stated were around communicating to employees what, why, and how it's going to happen. There could be fear by employees that this was going to affect their job, they might lose their job. So communication helps relieve or reduce some of those fears. Give employees a chance to voice their thoughts by bringing them into this process. Can be a way to get their buy-in and reduce their concerns. and undergo company-wide education and training. And we have a quote here from one of the respondents who said, when handed a measure of control or power over the situation, employees are less likely to see digital transformation as a potential threat. So that's why involving the employees, getting them to be a partner in this process, and communicating with them throughout is a really critical component of a successful transformation effort. The second was around building a case around return on investment. How do we get our board or our senior executives to buy in? Well, we need to show that this is critical for the future of the business and it returns the investment or effort that we're going to put into it. And some of the pointers that executives highlighted, they think about when they're discussing the return on investment, proving or showing the return on investment. Of course, first of all, return on investment in terms of profitability. So that's operations, revenues, and costs. But other parts of the ROI case that they mentioned were showing the competitive landscape and what competitors are doing and what that's resulted in for competitors as part of building a potential, compelling case for senior management. Impact on the broader sector. How is the sector itself changing? Channels and ways of doing business as part of the return on investment case. And certainly impact on brand value, customer experience, and customer satisfaction. And this goes back to one of the key drivers of digital transformation being changing consumer behavior. If companies don't continue to keep up with changing consumer behavior, they stand to lose out versus the companies that really are keeping up. The third best practice area we wanted to get into was around vendors and external partners. Are companies doing their internal transformation, their digital transformation internally, alone? Or are they working with other vendors and partners? What kind of vendors and how is this relationship? And the first finding was that about half the companies are leveraging external partners to implement or support their digital transformation efforts. And they highlighted two kinds of vendors. Technology vendors. Some of the companies that they mentioned are players like Microsoft or MasterCard, Oracle, the global technology players. And the second type was strategy and design consultants. And of the half of the companies who said that they're using external support, 2/3 of them said that they leverage both types, design and technology. When asked about the availability of those vendors, about 1/3 said that they are experiencing difficulty locating vendors. They cited lower quality local suppliers, a limited local offering, and difficulty in finding the right vendor team to handle the account or the transformation program that they need. On the flip side, the majority said that they were able to find the vendors that they need. 66% said this. And part of this was that they felt there was a high number of available vendors globally, and that remote communication and implementation technologies allowed them to work with foreign vendors. So unfortunately, one of the findings is, and this could be certainly an opportunity, that there is a need for more local vendors within Kuwait or partners that can support large corporates in their digital transformation efforts. When asked about data sharing, especially today in the context of GDPR and the sensitivities and increasing regulations around data sharing, most companies reported that this wasn't a major issue for them or in their collaboration with vendors. Companies say that they share data, they adhere to the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, and that they protect their data in their relationship with vendors through non-disclosure agreements, or through following their own data policies that are applied to the vendor, internal data governance or data loss prevention policies. A minority said that they don't share data, and most of those are because there's regulatory measures or regulatory requirements that don't allow them to share certain types of data. And they somehow get around this or avoided having to share data with their vendors by having the vendors work on-site and on in-house devices. As we said, about half companies said they do use external vendors. 50% said that they build their own technology in-house. And these companies expressed that they have a lot of confidence in their internal capabilities as the main reason or driver for them to build in-house. They also cited that they have difficulty finding the right partners, and they questioned or doubted whether external parties could deliver the kind of innovative and out-of-the-box solutions that they needed. In addition to the above, we asked companies about the kinds of KPIs that they're keeping in mind as they're implementing their digital transformation strategy. And there were three kind of buckets that came up as the most common types of KPIs. The first are financial performance that were cited by 50% of respondents. And those are mainly around cost reduction and revenue and sales generation. But other KPIs that were mentioned were around customer satisfaction. And some of those KPIs were around user engagement, customer acquisition or retention and churn, customer attitudes and perception, and the percentage of conversions or drop-offs during transactions. Those were some of the key metrics that they were looking at. And the last was around internal processes. And 33% mentioned KPIs around internal processes. Some of the most common were around migration of users to digital channels and the adoption of digital channels, as well as process efficiency optimization internally. How long or how difficult or how slow is it to get something done internally? Looking forward, we chatted with the survey respondents about their future plans and insights or recommendations or advice on future transformation. And key advice was around prioritization. There are a lot of things that are going on in digitization. Digitization can touch basically every function within the organization at most levels: internal, external, marketing, sales, product development, internal comms, HR. So companies said that it's really important that executives prioritize their efforts and focus on initiatives that further their strategic goals. And this goes back to the first steps: identify your priorities and strategic goals that show quick results, because it's really important. Those quick results can help build momentum for I think I'm back. Starting with initiatives that can show quick results and thus build momentum and show leadership, show employees, show key stakeholders that this process is going to bring results and bring results quickly. And prioritize as well efforts that can be used to combat threats and competition. We saw that as a key driver as well, companies needing digitization to differentiate themselves and to keep up with, especially the threat of global competitors and pure play digital competitors. The second was around becoming more customer focused, and companies can do this. Some of the things that survey respondents mentioned was building more direct contact with customers, positioning customers at the center of planning and transformation planning. This is not just about how do we get our product done faster, but how do we become a customer-centric organization, and continuing to have customer needs in mind as companies shape products and services. And so being attuned to the changing consumer habits is critical in this process. A third recommendation was around staying up to date. Technology is transforming extremely quickly, and within each sector, it's become a sea of technologies and services that are out there. And some of the advice that companies had for staying up to date was around leveraging their suppliers and vendor partners to stay up to date, monitoring social media, engaging in peer-to-peer dialogue. And this could even extend to things like associations and the role that associations can play in helping companies keep ahead of trends. Align with technology research firms, whether it's companies globally like Forrester, Gartner, IDC. These companies deliver reports on transformation that can be a great asset to help companies keep up with the latest trends. Connect with startup businesses. Today, increasingly, startups are redefining the sectors that they're operating in and being very agile and innovative. And one way companies can stay up to date is by really being close to the startups that are operating in their industry. And of course, attending industry-specific conferences. And we've seen technology become an increasingly important part of conferences across sectors. Banking conferences now have large chunks of content dedicated to digital banking, and we see this across the board for other sectors. I'll end here with a quote: "Putting skilled leaders that understand the technicalities and potential of digital technologies at the forefront can help bridge technology gaps and guide the company in the right direction." It's really important, as we mentioned, transformation is technology enabled, but people led. If there is one of the takeaway from this, is that the human component is the make or break it when it comes to the digital transformation strategy. As I mentioned, this report is just one of the 4 reports that we have recently launched with KFAS. This report I've shared some of the insights with, but there are great specific sector insights around healthcare, hospitality, and ICT in 3 other dedicated reports. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm open to any questions. Happy to take your questions. Please, you can put them into the question component. Maybe I'll turn it to Aisha to lead on this. And what I'll do now is I'll add the full report to the handouts button so that anyone who's interested can download it immediately here, and you can review the full report.
Yes, and also just to add to that the reports are available on the KFAS website. And hopefully within a few days, this talk will be uploaded on the KFAS YouTube channel. So if anyone has any questions, I can't see any questions yet. But thank you, Omar, for a great informative presentation. I think it's very clear and to the point. And it was great having this opportunity and having this talk tonight. I hope everyone in the audience enjoyed it as well. And yeah, thank you very much. And that's it.
Any questions? Last chance?
It doesn't seem like there is. I think everything was clear in the report.
Okay, wonderful. Well,
okay, great.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to our audience. Thank you to KFAS for collaborating with us on this. And we hope you find the reports useful. And you can always reach out, whether to us or to KFAS, if there's further information that you'd like, questions that you have that you didn't get a chance to ask today. Of course, we'd be happy to answer them. Thank you, everyone.